Okay, and welcome to Chapter 9 of my notes on House of Leaves. And this is where things start to get weird. Yeah, so this might be a very long video. So buckle in and get your book out and let's dive on in. So, as always, we begin with the epigraph. I'm just going to move my notes out of the way. So here we have actually 3 different epigraphs. We're going to start with Essentius, just because that's the one I've written down first. I will argue that it's alphabetical order. It's not, actually. So this is actually referring to, forgive my Latin, unlike Johnny, I'm not fluent in that language. I'm going to say Jodocus, Badius, or also known as Badius Essentius, and he was actually a pioneer in the printing press industry. So I thought that was interesting. Then we have Nicholas Trevette down here, and he was a Dominican friar, and this quote actually comes from his commentary on the book City of God by Augustine. And Augustine's thesis depicts the history of the world as this kind of universal warfare between God and the devil, and this metaphysical war is not limited by time, but only by geography on Earth. So I thought that was interesting. We have this idea of time being funny in the book. And then we have Virgil, the one up here. He's the author of Aeneid, which is about finding a new home for the Trojan people. In Book 6 of Aeneid, the main character Aeneas goes to the temple for Apollo, which was built by Daedalus, and Daedalus also built the Labyrinth for the Minotaur. In this chapter, we get introduced to the Minotaur. Next to the temple of that, though, the Temple of Apollo is an entrance to a maze of caves, another possible reference in House of Leaves, that lead to the underworld, to the HoL, or hell. And he sees Aeneas sees an urn showing Pasiphae's copulation with the bull and the birth of the Minotaur. The urn is then guarded by the Cumaean Sibyl, and she tells him not to look at the urn, saying, "This moment doesn't require your sightseeing," or "This urn isn't for you." And we get another reference to the Cumaean Sibyl by Polyphena on page 642 over here. "I am leaving after all, though it is no easy task, especially for this old Sibyl of Cumae." And I'll talk more about her when we get to that section there. Okay. Yeah, so that is just the epigraph there. And then we get into the next page about the etymology of the word labor. I'm Canadian, so I spell it with a U. So it's the Latin. He mentions here about the etymology of labor. So it's from the Latin labore. Sure, as I said, I don't speak Latin. Laborare, laborare. To labor, strive, exert oneself, suffer, be in distress, to work out. Also from the French laboureur, which is to plow or to cultivate. On page 109, we start getting these weird references as footnote numbers. So we have this weird K symbol. It means indicate direction to proceed, and this is like the first time where we're going to get lost in the footnotes trying to follow everything. Things aren't in order anymore. So that K, if you go to page 582, you'll find out that it means that indicate direction to proceed. If you look at this appendices here, there's a little K over here, and that's what it says. We'll see a lot more of these symbols throughout. Okay, again we have the JL symbol right here, which was also on that page, and it means not understood. I know the P spot is probably in reference to the prostate, but P is also significant in that it could be a reference to Polyphena, of course. Oh, we're still on this page. Sorry. Footnote 120. See, we get lost really easily. Footnote 122. Here we have a reference to Paolo Santarcangeli, his Livre de Labyrinths, which means Book of Labyrinths. In this essay, Paolo, because I can pronounce that part, I can't pronounce his last name, so I'm going to refer to him as Paolo. We're on a first name basis with this guy. In this essay, Paolo has attempted to convey the multiplicity of possible interpretations of a myth, such as that of the labyrinth, sums up a limit situation of the soul when it leans into its own abysses. Starting from the Greek fable and its various versions going back to prehistory, the author reviews the multiple aspects and meanings that the myth has had among primitives in Cretan civilization and in the 18th century, and that it has preserved to the present day. In this way, he brings out the religious, initiatory, symbolic, and psychological components of the labyrinth, in which he sees, despite the variety forms, has taken over the ages, a representation of the motivations and anguish of the human soul. It is, in short, the image that man has of his destiny, a labyrinth whose exit is given to him by religious faith or knowledge. So, that's another link between the soul, creating your own kind of labyrinth or house, and how the house is affected by people's emotions and feelings and their mindset. Okay, we also get a reference here to Daedalus. And this is not a real magazine, but this is the guy who built the labyrinth for the Minotaur. Daedalus also has an interesting son, Icarus, who flew too close to the sun and lost his wings. Again, could that be a play on S-U-N or S-O-N? And what does Icarus link to Johnny, perhaps? I didn't highlight all the names because this thing would just all be highlighted. I pointed out some fake names, but there are some real ones. Throughout here we have Hermann Kern, Labyrinthi. In English this is translated as Through the Labyrinth. At this point I just want to give a shout out to archive.org for having most of these books, and I was able to go through and skim through them really fast, which is where I got a lot of these quotes or just summaries of the books. So I got this quote from Hermann Kern's book. Labyrinths and mazes are found all over the world and have been a source of intrigue and wonder throughout history. This richly illustrated and carefully documented standard work explores the manifold aspects of labyrinths, from their architectural, astrological, and mythological significance to their iconographical, mathematical, and artistic fascination, while also examining their socio-historical context. So big history on labyrinths and mazes. We also have W.H. Matthews' Mazes and Labyrinths, which searches for the origins of mazes and labyrinths, but does not find an answer. I thought that was significant. Then we have Rodney Castleton's The Knossos Labyrinth. So he rejects Evans' view of Knossos as a Bronze Age royal palace. Castleton puts forward alternative interpretations that the building was a necropolis or a temple, and argues that the temple interpretation is the most satisfactory in light of modern archaeological knowledge about Minoan Crete. So this idea linking again religion with the labyrinth. And we haven't come across a lot of religious references yet, but there is a lot of heavy religious references in further chapters here. We also have W.W.R. Ball's Mathematical Recreations and Essays. From the description it says, for over 80 years this delightful classic has provided entertainment through mathematical problems commonly known as recreations. Although they often involve fundamental mathematical methods and notions, their chief appeal is as games or puzzles rather than the usefulness of their conclusions. He has a chapter on mazes, which begins on page 149 of his book. The paths in the maze are what previously we have termed branches, and I thought that was significant, this idea of branches and the tree. Ash Tree Lane, if you know, we get a reference to Yggdrasil in the back. So trees are big in House of Leaves. I mean, the title is Leaves, right? Okay, so the paths of the maze are what previously we have termed branches, and the places where two or more paths meet are nodes. The entrance to the maze and the end of a blind alley and the center of the maze are free ends and therefore odd nodes. One class of what the ancients called mazes or labyrinths seems to have comprised any complicated building with numerous vaults and passages. For instance, see the descriptions of the labyrinth at Lake Moeris, given by Herodotus, which was an underground section of maze full of coffins. And if we go to page 94, we have a reference to this book, Michael Ray Taylor's Cave Passages, which also talks about that same coffin-filled maze. So I thought that was interesting. Another reference in this thing is to O.B. Hardison Jr. book called Entering the Maze, which is not about mazes or labyrinths, but about like as in the physical type construction, or like even just like a maze that you do on paper, but it's about how contemporary culture is a maze that seems to lead everywhere and nowhere all at once. And then it's interesting, we do have a reference to a fake book by Patricia Flynn called Jejunum and Ilium, and while that's not a real book, the jejunum and ilium are parts of the small intestine, which I guess you could argue is labyrinthine in nature. Sure. I'm working on finding body parts throughout House of Leaves too for some theories, so that's just where that came from. Okay, so let me pull this off. This page, combined with that, but more so this part, looks like a key. You see that it's like I don't have a key on me, but hopefully you can see that looks like a key to unlock something. But where's the lock, you might want to ask? Well, page 144. Let's go to there. Right here, we have, because I drew all over mine, you can't really see it, but that does look like a lock where you could possibly put a key. Okay, it's lots of key imagery in House of Leaves. Page 635, we're going to go over to Pelfina again. We have her throwing away the keys, right? And then we have page 61. Just get this, where we have references to Tom's keys, and specifically the red key. And if you'll remember the notes from these pages, you might not. The red key is interesting because key, as in K-Y-E, is Old English for cow. And what is a minotaur but part cow? And these red lines are all about the minotaur. So the red key, the minotaur, is the key. I thought I was just like mind blown at that point. I thought it was so cool. And this is where we start also getting the footnotes out of order. Yeah. So just we're starting to get lost in the labyrinth here as readers. Within the key here, we have a reference to King Minos. King Minos did not build a labyrinth to imprison a monster. This is a somewhat interesting suspicion, as it says. King Minos did not build the labyrinth to imprison a monster, but to conceal a deformed child. His child. A man with a deformed face. And a reference to Pasiphae as well. And I mentioned... is it here? No, in the previous chapter that we have. Now Johnny has a split tooth. His face is kind of deformed, arguably. So yeah, we have. Did Zampano maybe build this labyrinth, this book, to hide his son? Is his son Johnny? I don't know. Pasiphae was the mother of the Minotaur. Yeah. Okay, on page 111 we get a paragraph indication here. This is called a pilcrow, or a blind pea, is another name for it. And who do we know is blind? Zampano. Who do we know that has a significant name beginning with P? Polyphena. Polyphena, Pasiphae. So I thought that was interesting. This doesn't have to do with any pages. I was just kind of doing random numerology on the names. I don't believe in this stuff, but I thought it was interesting anyways to do. And if you so what you do here is you're aligning the letters with their position in the alphabet. So like J is the 10th letter in the alphabet, and so on. And if you do the numbers and add them all up, for Johnny it equals 86. For Zampano it also equals 86. 86 in reference to language is like in restaurant slang, you say something's 86, that means you don't have it anymore. It's gone. It's non-existent. So I thought that was interesting that maybe Johnny and Zampano are both 86'd in the novel. They don't actually exist. Just a little random note that I stuck in there. Okay, I gotta jump to the next page. Okay. Sorry, my notes are all over the page. The function of, okay. The significance of the center. So the function of a center was not only to orient, balance, and organize the structure. One cannot, in fact, conceive of an unorganized structure. The center is at the center of the totality, and yet, since the center does not belong to the totality, is not part of the totality has its center elsewhere. The center is not the center. And we are told, and when I didn't write this down, so in Polyphena's letters, here, if you count the number of words and you find the words in the center of this coded letter by Polyphena, we have lines, ostracized, virgin, evenings, which spells out love in the code. So love is at the center in this book. Thought that was interesting talking about the center here. My notes are all over the place here because I keep doing this. Anyways, so we're working on this page. Down here, all these words, and Dilomorph, ampullary, crest, ampulla, semicircular duct, maculae, utricle, and sac hole are all terms for inner ear organs. And the inner ear looks like a shell. If you look at the bones. And on page 398, you get more references to shells. Yeah. And if again you look at the cover and the spiral on the cover, kind of like a shell, right? Again, we here get reference to certain centers are externalized. That was the Polyphena letter again. We also get here, in many legends, the center of the world is concretized as a tree. And on our very last page in the book, I move my notes out of the way. we get a reference to Yggdrasil, the Norse tree. Oh. Sorry about that. I have to have this in a very precarious position to film this. Okay, I'm just taking a look at my notes. Okay, so footnote 131. The footnotes are all over the place here. 132. Anyways, right here, we get a reference to Mircea Eliade's Patterns in Comparative Religions. And this is a book, a description of this book says, in this era of increased knowledge, the essence of religious phenomena eludes the psychologists, sociologists, linguists, and other specialists because they do not study it as religious. According to Mircea Eliade, they miss the one irreducible element in religious phenomena, the element of the sacred. I thought that was interesting. Then we get a reference to some artists, and I'm going to switch over to show you some pictures, because you got to see these images. Okay, so we have Luzitsky here. I'm just going to click on that, and he should pop up. Why is it not coming up? There we go. So this is one of Luzitsky's pieces of work, which is very kind of uses a lot of liminal space, kind of like this abstract notion here. I thought it was an interesting piece to show of his. He says the room is there for the human being, not the human being for the room. And then we have Escher, and this is the one of the iconic Escher images of the stairs going every which way, in this way that doesn't make logical sense to our brains, but is probably like a good representation of the host, right? Okay. While we're here, I'm also going to show you this website of Hugh of St. Victor. Just this image I thought was interesting, that this happens on the next page, on page 114. We get a reference to him, Hugh of St. Victor. There we go. Okay, so back to the actual book. Page 114, I already showed you the image of Hugh of St. Victor. I'll talk a little bit more about him here. The antithesis of the library is Noah's Ark. So I thought this was interesting. As we have said before, the Ark of the Flood is a secret place of our own heart, in which we must hide from the tumult of this world. But because the feebleness of our condition itself prevents our staying long in the silence of inward contemplation, we have a way out by the door and window. The door denotes the way out through action, the window the way out through thought. So I thought that was very interesting in further context of House of Leaves and finding a way out of the labyrinth, even though this was the arc and the opposite of it, but you still get out the same ways, right? Okay, we still have more of these weird things. X is unable to proceed. Yeah. Throw my notes over here on page 115. I'll just stick that to that. We get one of these words that stick out because they are so unusual, to me at least. Anfractuosity. Yeah, I'm not fluent in Latin, and I'm not fluent in English either, apparently. This word means a winding channel or crevice, or one of the fissures separating the convolutions of the brain. And I thought this this passage from a drama on the seashore by Monsieur Daniel Conway was interesting in how it used that word as well. It says, at this moment, the sun as in S-U-N, sympathizing with these thoughts of love or of the future, has cast on the tiny side of this rock an ardent light. Some mountain flowers called attention. The calm and the silence enlarged this anfractuosity, somber in reality, colored by the dreamer. So I thought that was just an interesting passage that also used that same odd word. And then we get down here around this word other, and it's capitalized. And the phrase is, not even a god or an other comprehends the entire maze, and so therefore can never offer a definitive answer. And it could be other, calling attention to the fact that it's capitalized. Could it also mean mother? Just put an M in front of it. And then we're going to jump down here to this phrase. This new discovery has left me practically beside myself, by which I mean priapic. And priapic is another odd word that I had to look further into. So priapic is from the Greek, meaning erection, phallic, male sexuality, excessively male. So if Johnny is beside himself being male, then does that mean that then we have a female author writing this? And if he is beside himself, outside of himself, he is masculine. So she's beside herself, not feeling herself, feeling male, not female. Could the she then be Polyphena? I hope that made sense. It makes sense to me, but yeah, that was me really getting to it, I guess. Okay, next page. I finally walked outside. I had no idea where I was. We stumbled to a corner. So when did I become we? And is Johnny not alone at this point? Because before this, it was just like he was alone. And then this white car, a VW Rabbit, perhaps, is another reference to a white rabbit, perhaps also to Thumper. I made notes about that in previous chapters about following the white rabbit, or Thumper also being a reference to a rabbit. On page 117, we get this phrase, the blind men of all blind men, me. Don't know why I wrote that. And this is in Johnny's text, and Johnny's not blind, but Zampano is. So then we get more questions about who the author is. And I like this little note here. It says, hey, where are you? Lost. And I was like, me too. I'm completely lost at this point. Okay, and here's where things start to get even weirder. 142, the note is absolutely missing here. And then we have, on page 119, a hole in the wall. The wall of text now has a hole in it. And this actually appears as Holloway kicks a hole in the wall of the house. So the book is starting to reflect the physical environment of the house. Okay. I do have notes on this, but I'm going to finish this page and then we'll come back to that footnote. I think I'm going to do it all in one video. It's going to be a really long video. Thank you for sticking around. So we get a reference to Sir Joshua Reynolds, and he promoted this thing called the grand style in painting, which depended on the idealization of the imperfect. It's interesting also to note that in 1789, Reynolds lost the sight of his left eye, which forced him into retirement. You also get a reference up here, to John Updike and his translation of Updike, once observed in the course of translating the Labyrinth. And this is a reference to the Labyrinths by Borges, which John Updike translated. and that is a poem, and I'm going to read the poem to you. The translation of John Updike poem called The Labyrinth. Zeus himself could not undo these nets of stone encircling me. My mind forgets that persons I have been along the way, the hated way of monotonous walls, which is my fate. The gallery seems straight, but curve fugitively, forming secret circles at the terminus of years, and the parapets have been worn smooth by the passage of days. Here, in the tepid alabaster dust, are tracks that frighten me. The hollow air of evening sometimes brings a bellowing, or the echo desolate of a bellowing. I know that hidden in the shadows there lurks another, whose task is to exhaust the loneliness that braids and weaves this hell, to crave my blood and fatten on my death. We seek each other. Oh, if only this were the last days of our antithesis. Borges is quoted, or referenced at least, throughout House of Leaves, so I thought it was significant to read that. And on another note, on footnote 143, we have a reference to Gerard Eisnick. Yeah, he's not real, but he could possibly be a reference to Heinz Eisnick and Gerard Heymans, who worked together, I believe. So Eisnick, this is a quote for him. I always felt that a scientist owes the world only one thing, and that is the truth as he sees it. If the truth contradicts deeply held beliefs, that is too bad. Tact and diplomacy are fine in international relations, in politics, perhaps even in business. In science, only one thing matters, and that is the facts. It's also interesting to note that many of his theories were actually very wrong and controversial. He tried to link cancer to personality, and he believed that there was a scientific basis for astrology. So he was an interesting fellow. Heymans, Gerard, of the Gerard Eisnick, proposed a form of psychic monism where reality consists of the mind, and he argued that everything is part of the one world consciousness and that everything is connected. So I thought that was quite interesting in reference to House of Leaves. That first one being about, the only thing that matters is facts, and then having the guy saying that, pitting up these bogus theories, and then Heymans talking about how reality consists of the mind, and how the mind and mindset and emotions of the people in the house kind of mold their experience in the house. I'm going to talk about footnote 144, which is the hole in the wall here. You'll notice on the back it's the same words, but they're just reversed. And the hole, let me move those notes. The hole is continuing on, so yeah, I just kind of categorized it, went through and looked up everything. So the first kind of things that are talked about are things to do with plumbing, water, which is water, and air, such as hot air registers to waste stack. The next section, the things that are categorized there are fire and gas, so that's fire protection equipment to the gaseous suppressive systems. The third category is electricity, which is interrupted by pots, pans, and cans. And that starts from daisy chain wiring to the 1,000-watt aviation. The next category is things to do with photography and light. That's from picture studio to metal halide. The next one is communication. That's from public address to signal multimedia designs. And the next one is automation. That's from BAS to BMAS automation. The next one is style or design. That's from moldings to parquet. I thought it was interesting that the flooring mentioned, Danby, Imperial, Colorado, Yule, or Carrara, are all forms of white marble. Yule marble is actually what the tomb of the unknown soldier is built from. I thought that was interesting. The fact that marble is mined from beneath the earth, I thought was also an interesting point to make. Carrara marble, that is what the Pieta statue is carved from. That's where Mary is holding the dead body of Jesus. So that symbol of the mother. I think there are symbols of Pelafina being referred to as a virgin mother, because we don't know who Johnny's actual father is, right? So holding a dead body, and there's theories that Johnny is in fact dead and not alive. And then the flooring, the parquet, is actually interesting because it's a geometric mosaic of wood. Yeah. We know wood and trees are very significant to the book. The next category is nature. So these are all mentions of trees from redwood to eastern cottonwood, but it's significant that the ash tree isn't mentioned in this list. I thought that was interesting because ash tree, Yggdrasil is an ash tree, and they are on Ash Tree Lane. An ash tree was not included in the hole in the wall. The next category is construction, from subfloor to bed molding. Then we have stairs, from risers to balusters. Decorations is the next category, from wallpapers to brass. Then we have construction again, and that's from nail to Duracoat. And then we get references to architecture, that's from roof to battlement. Some significant things that stand out from there. Westwork, which is the west-facing entrance of a church. So it's multiple stories between two towers. Then we have ziggurat, which is a type of massive structure built in ancient Mesopotamia. It has the form of a terraced compound of successively receding stories or levels, so like a pyramid but with steps, and they were believed to be the dwelling places of gods. Then we have this word brise soleil, which is used to deflect sunlight, and as we know, the house is dark. The hallway is dark. Then we have trompe l'oeil, sure, which means deceive the eye. It's the highly realistic optical illusion of three-dimensional space and objects on a two-dimensional surface. So like our book is obviously 2D, but maybe Danilevsky is trying to deceive our eye and give us this three-dimensional space by hitting a hole in the book. Then we get references to columns and arches. Is the last one, from pilasters to import. Yes, so that is that footnote. I went through and did it. Okay, next page. Page 120. Sebastiano Peruz de Montclaus. Yep, this is a fake person. But Montclaus means closed mountain. And we know that at this point there's a lot of references to mountains and mountain climbings. Mountain gear. The stairs are kind of like a mountain that they have to descend or ascend. So that was interesting. And Peruz could be possibly from two different words, maybe a bit of a stretch, but perde, which is French for to lose, or pere, which is French for father, so a lost father. And then we have this reference to Andrea Palladio, and he is the founder, creator of Palladian grammar, which is like the basis for architectural studies. And there is a there's a thing I'll link below. I won't go through it with you guys because it's quite long, about his I'll just link the PDF down below and you can look at the Palladian grammar notes. Okay. Footnote 149, we're going to ignore this one for now. Footnote 149, we have a reference to William J. Mitchell's The Logic of Architecture. And Mitchell was one of the first people who considers how buildings may be described in words and shows how such descriptions may be formalized by the notation of first-order predicate calculus. This leads to the idea of a critical language for speaking about the qualities of buildings. So we start to get a lot of references to architecture here. Footnote 150 down below, we have a reference to Aristides Quinn, who is fake, but Quinn is actually a computer program that takes no input and produces a copy of its own source code as its only output. It is a self-replicating program. So this idea of kind of like maybe the house as like self-replicating and constantly creating new rooms and hallways. The name Quinn was coined by Douglas Hofstadter in his popular 1979 science book, Gödel Escher Bach, in honor of philosopher Willard Van Orman Quinn, who made an extensive study of indirect self-reference. Okay. 5 points of architecture. Oh, we're on page 121. Guess we're skipping this footnote. For now. Yeah. Oh. Do I have... No. Sorry. As I said, this chapter is so confusing. So, yeah. We have the reference to 5 points of architecture here, and those 5 points are pilatus, which is replacing supporting walls by a grid of reinforced concrete columns. The second is absence of supporting walls means house is unrestrained in its internal use. The third point is a separate exterior from structural function, so it sets the facade free. Point 4 is horizontal windows, cuts the facade along the entire length and light comes in the rooms equally. And the fifth point of this man's architecture is roof gardens, so the flat roof serves a domestic purpose. So maybe we have an idea of what the house looks like there, maybe. We get this word polypod, which is interesting. It means having many feet. Or polylith, which is a prehistoric monument consisting of many stones. And polyolithic means having a massive changing structure that permits individual variations. So a room that, or structure that changes. This reference down here to Greenfield and Schneider. This is a study on the structural principles important in language syntax trees for grammar. So I wanted to show you an image of a grammar. Okay, so I couldn't find a grammar tree example online that was good enough. So I got this book, which is about grammar trees, diagramming sentences, and pulled up this one. So this is an example of the grammar tree. You have the sentence, the dog will chase the rabbit, and then I'm so used to being at the sentence up here and then the words going backwards, but this is the idea that you then break it down into like nouns and subjects and verbs and all that kind of stuff. So diagramming sentences, and as you can tell, it looks quite complicated and creates this kind of maze of words. It's also used in philosophy as well to create things. And so yeah, there's an example of a grammar tree. Okay, we're going to get out of the footnotes and back into the main text here. We have this phrase, "In my Father's house are many rooms," and this is I say the beginning of obvious religious references in here, and this is from John. It's from the Bible, the Gospel of John, chapter 14, verses 2 to 6. "In my Father's house are many mansions," is the translation in this one, but also many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may also be. And where I go, you know, and the way you know. Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going, and how can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And I thought that was interesting. Again, we have this idea of who is Johnny's father, who's the father in the text. Okay. On page 122 here, we have another interesting word, atrabilius. It's from Latin, and it means black bile. So this was like the idea that our emotions and our wellness, our health, was affected by different fluids in the body. It's a medieval notion. So if you were atrabilious, if you had an excess of black bile, you were melancholic, cantankerous, malevolent, and I thought this passage was interesting, from Prose Fancies by Richard Le Gallienne. And that is, but the torch of taste has for the moment fallen into the hands of little men, anemic and atrabilious, with neither laughter nor pity in their hearts. And I thought that was a good reference to Holloway. He's tries to be this big tough man, but he's really just a little man, anemic and atrabilious. We get this F symbol. I'm not going to bring you back to page 582, but that's referenced there, and this means requires food and water. Yeah. Okay, and then we have page 123. We have this quote here called, I call architecture frozen music. And page 633, again, a Pelafina letter. Some people have argued that this is a spiral staircase. And I made notes, a whole video on this being the grand staircase. And this is a quote from Goethe to Peter Eichermann. Garnier, who built the Garnier Palace, which is where the grand staircase, I argued, was, said the opera is the staircase, and the importance of architecture is what he was emphasizing there, especially to sound. So I think this was interesting, both Goethe and Eckermann. This likely quoted from the book Conversations with Goethe. Goethe, I don't know how to pronounce it, I'm sorry. I call it Goethe because that's how anglicized. I'll anglicize it, Goethe. Written by Eckermann, but some editions go so far as to publish the book as Conversations with Eckermann, with Goethe listed as the author. I know I'm going to get corrected in the comments, but that's what I'm saying. So the practice mistakenly implies Eckermann played a role of editor rather than the author. So I thought that was interesting that we have a question of authorship in that book. And Borges, who we know that Danilewski likes to quote, or Zampano maybe likes to quote instead, or Johnny. Borges is probably throughout House of Leaves, let's just say that. He had this to actually say about that book, the Conversations with Goethe. I'm going to laugh every time I say it because I know that's not how you say it. It's like Goethe or something like that. Eckermann doesn't exist except as a kind of machine that records Goeth's words. We know nothing about Eckermann, nothing about his character. So I thought that was interesting, again, this question of authorship. Then we have this interesting word, kermurmuring. I just thought it was really neat. It means to murmur or rumble or to experience indigestion. So this idea that the house is eating them. And then down here in footnote 158, we get a reference to Eugenio Roche, and that's a fake name, but it could be reference to Eugenio Coserio. Sorry guys, Coseriu. As always, I have my notes linked down below if you want to read them. They're not complete, I add to them all the time, but yeah, so Coseriu, Eugenio Coserio, and Eleanor Roche. So Roche, we'll talk about her first. She developed prototype theory, which is that any given concept in any given language has a real-world example that best represents that concept. So this idea that language is represented in the real world. And then Coserio, Eugenio, he also had a prototype theory that has been criticized by those that still endorse the traditional theory of categories, like the linguist Eugenio Coserio. Yeah. Okay, we're getting into more difficult words as we go along. Here, page 125. We have new part. This word. Try and pronounce that. I dare you. John is de Cas criddle. That's what I'm saying. But if you say it in a certain way, it could also sound as John is the cat's cradle, right? So Johnny is a cat's cradle of some sort. So my mind first went to the Kurt Vonnegut novel, where we have a horrified narrator discovered by few other survivors, including Newt and Frank Hoinkicker, and he lives with them in a cave for several months, during which time he writes the contents of the book, The Cat's Cradle. Driving through the barren wasteland one day, he spots Bokunin, who is contemplating what the last words of the books of Bokunin should be. Bokunin states that if he were younger, he would place a book about human stupidity on the peak of San Lorenzo's highest mountain, rest his head on it, swallow Ice 9, and die while thumbing his nose at God. Vonnegut himself claimed that his books are essentially mosaics made up of a whole bunch of tiny little chips, and each chip is a joke. So I thought that was interesting. First of all, mentioning the cave and the mountains, which are prevalent in House of Leaves, the writing of books. The Book of Bokunin was a religious book in the context of the story as well. We're not here to talk about Cat's Cradle, but I thought this idea also of Vonnegut claiming that his books are mosaics was interesting, because this is very mosaic-like in its layout at this point. Cat's Cradle is also a kid's string game, so possible reference to like thread and string, the thread that is used to escape the labyrinth. It's also a song by Harry Chapin about a father and son relationship. One of the words in that phrase is, "I'm gonna be like you, Dad. When you coming home, Dad? I don't know when." So this idea again of who's the father and the importance of sons. Okay. Page 127. We have here a phrase, une solution politique honorable. An honorable political solution. And I thought this was interesting, and the question here is raised, why is it written in French? And this was actually a phrase used by General Henri Navarre in the Battle of Den Bien Phu, which, if you'll remember, Zampano, in the introduction, we have a list of his girls' names, and they are all battles, hills, strategic positions that the French had in the Battle of Den Bien Phu. So Den Bien Phu is significant. It's the Indochina War, which predates the Vietnam War. So I'm just going to read this out loud. Historians interpret the May 1954 fall of the French fortress at Dien Bien Phu to, in the words of French writer Jules Roy, the search for a classic set-piece battle in which the French hoped to bring the destructive powers of modern technology to bear on the elusive communist enemy and smash him with an iron fist. The logic of the French gamble is explained by two factors, one tactical, the other strategic. The tactical piece evolved from a faith in the defensive capabilities of the base aéreo terrestre, or hedgehog, a system of mutually supporting strong points tied together by barbed wire and trenches arranged around a heavily defended airstrip. The strategic piece was the offering of acute war fatigue in Paris that in May 1953 had Prime Minister René May admonishing his new commander in Indochina, General Henri Navarre, to create the conditions for une solution politique honorable. Navarre's plan was to seek a major battle to wound the Viet Minh so devastatingly that Paris could trade a thumping tactical triumph for a settlement more favorable than its military performance heretofore would merit. Dien Bien Phu failed. So that is in French because it is a quote from that battle that Zampano fought in. Okay. Go on. Page 128. We get this rapping incessantly against the floor. That just reminded me of the raven rapping on my chamber door. Kind of rhymes. Quoth the raven nevermore. So Wax and Jed, maybe nevermore, if they aren't rescued. And again, a reference to Poe. Marksy Danilowski's sister, her stage name as a musician is Poe, and she released an album to coincide with House of Leaves as well. Then we get a reference to Heaven's Door down here, and this is not a real reference, but Heaven's Door is the name of a song written for the movie Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. So soon after completion, the film was taken away from the director and substantially re-edited, resulting in a truncated version released to theaters and largely disowned by the cast and crew members. Peckinpah's preview version was released on video in 1988, leading to a re-evaluation with many critics hailing it as a mistreated classic and one of the era's best films. So this idea of a piece of art being taken away from the original people and re-edited. Maybe like how Johnny is re-editing Zampano's works, and Zampano is re-editing Navidson's works. On this page, we also get the word prolex hidden here, kind of in the crease here. Prolex is again a word I referenced before, used by both Johnny and Pelafina. Just one of those weird words that sticks out. Okay, over on this page, 129, we have this word, I just thought it was interesting, silentiary, which means religious silence. And then we have Johnny here, just the scars, the biggest one, of course, being the ones you know about, the strange, seething melt running from the inside of both elbows all the way to the end of both wrists. And this is Johnny talking about his scars from the burning oil, an accident that he sees as his fault. But if we go to page 627, here we get a reference here to Pelafina saying, "I never meant to burn you. You were only 4. So Johnny was burnt. He was hurt by Pelafina, and that's possibly where his scars come from.